Now, into the ticket office of Disneyland.
Oh boy, let's do this.
Don't think the CIA is going to be trying to hack your second-gen iPod.
I didn't think so. There might have been a lot of illegal music on there. I wouldn't doubt it. But, I mean...
You were supposed to bring death to the flagships, not join them.
That's a pill with two screens and it's open and you gotta swallow it.
iTunes is a constant source of embarrassment.
Behind-the-scenes camera crap.
Here, tell us about courage, Phil. Tell us about courage.
I am Nadella. Well, I can't do it anymore without laughing. I was going to do the whole thing.
Welcome, everybody, to the Calling All Platforms podcast. I'm your host tonight, Caleb. I'm here with Landon.
Hello.
And, again, if you haven't figured it out by now, because I'm hosting, that means that Wes is not here. In his place, however, we have special guest star, Tim Cook. That's honestly not even a thing that I actually want to have happen. Of all the guests that we could have from Apple, it would probably, I would want to talk to like maybe Johnny Truji, the chip department head guy, or Craig.
Yes.
Federighi.
Definitely Craig.
They'd be the two that I'd want to actually sit down with. I feel like with Tim, you'd get a whole lot of marketing garbage, marketing speak, and then like a whole lot of detailed information on the logistics of the company, which is like, I don't care. I couldn't care less. Tell me about the software. Tell me about the hardware. That's what I want to know about. And Tim is not that kind of CEO. So
also,
anywho,
in this scenario, I don't think any of them would do a really good job of telling us any Microsoft news.
That is true. That would be a bit of a step down in terms of, there you go, Wes. There's your compliment. You're better at giving us Microsoft news than Craig Federighi. You don't have nearly as good hair, but listener, if you would like to see Wes's lack of hair,
yes,
you can become a Patreon of the podcast and watch live streams in real time as we record. Anywho,
yes,
that is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the tech news, listener. It's been a couple of weeks, and so we have some stuff to catch you up on. In fact, there's one piece of news that I have that I had to rewrite like 3 times because the way in which I was going to be giving the news changed from a rumor to, from a speculation to a rumor to an actual announcement. And then, so we'll have it. It's going to happen. You'll hear about it. And actually, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and start with the news. And we're going to start with the thing that I just hinted at that started out initially in our last podcast. I mentioned how there were rumors about when AMD and Intel were going to be announcing their next series of processors, and how there was a possibility that AMD was accidentally going to be pushing their announcement to land on the same day as Intel's later in September. Turns out that did not happen. AMD may have been listening to the podcast and went, oh, wait, let's not do that. And they, in fact, did go with their initially rumored date of August 29th. They announced that they would be doing some stuff on August 29th. I planned to do that, and then we didn't record the podcast for that week, and so then the announcement actually happened. And so here we are, listener. AMD's announcement for Ryzen 7000 did, in fact, happen on August 29th. So it's possible that they were considering postponing it until reports hinted that Intel would be targeting the same date as they were thinking of postponing it to, and then they just elected to not do that. In either case, we now have some specs for the first launch chips of the 7000 line, which include the 7950X, the 7900X, both of which are Ryzen 9 processors, and then the Ryzen 7 7700X and the Ryzen 5 7600X. So, just going to give you the quick technical specs and price for all of these things. So, 7950X is their flagship 16-core, 32-thread processor that obviously is the follow-up to the 5900X. This time around, it has a base frequency of 4.5 gigahertz, which is actually pretty fast, and boosts up to 5.7 gigahertz. So not only have they, like with the 5000 series, they were like, yeah, boost clocks breaking the 5 gigahertz barrier. They are now a healthy dose above the 5 gigahertz barrier with their single core boost clocks. So that's pretty good. It also includes 80 megabytes of cache, which it is up from last generation, but it's not necessarily that much, especially when you compare it to the 3D V cache available on the 5800X 3D, which was the world's fastest gaming processor, up until, I guess, now Ryzen 7000 is supposedly faster. We did not actually hear anything about 3D V cache in this event. None of the chips that they announced have that. So presumably at some point in the next year or so, we're going to see even faster versions of these chips that have double to, in some cases, rumored triple the cache of some of these chips. So 80 megabytes is quite a bit of cache for a processor, but you could be seeing more than 200 megabytes for some of these 3D V cache versions. Just so that you're aware. All of these chips are going to support PCI Gen 5. We'll talk about that a little bit when we talk about the chipsets that were announced at the event. But the 7950X is going to start retailing for $700. The Ryzen 9 7900X is their 12-core, 24-thread CPU that is probably more appropriate for most people. Very similar. Base clock actually a little bit higher at 4.7 gigahertz, but the boost clocks are a little bit lower at 5.6. This one only has 76 megabytes of total V cache, which is just obviously terrible versus 80 at 76. That's pedestrian. And that'll retail for $550. The 7700X, 8-core, 16 threads, base clock of 4.5 gigahertz, boost of 5.4, 40 megs of cache, and retails for $400. And then the CPU that everybody should actually be paying attention to, and most people would actually want to buy, the 7600X is the 6-core, 12-thread processor. This has been the mid-range, kind of more budget-conscious flagship for AMD ever since the 2000 series of Ryzen processors. It's a great series of chips. They are bang for buck, just fantastic performers. So this one gets a 4.7 gigahertz base frequency and a boost of 5.3, 38 megs of cache, and a $300 starting price. So those prices are the same as the 5000 series. They did not increase, which is good, especially considering that the 5000 series was an increase over the 3000 series of chips. So glad they didn't increase that. Still kind of a bummer that they didn't decrease it. That would have been nice, but
nobody's decreasing prices nowadays.
Ain't that the truth? Well, actually, except for the GPU sellers, because it turns out freaking nobody's buying GPUs. Well, actually, there's way more GPUs than anybody wants, and we're all waiting on the next generation of GPUs to drop, and so nobody wants to buy the current generation, and those prices just keep coming down. I love it. Yeah. I'm waiting for Black Friday because I figure announcements for GPUs, new GPUs, are going to probably happen around the beginning of November. And so by Black Friday, I'll be able to buy current generation cards for 60 to 70% off of their MSRP if I'm shopping used ones on like eBay. And that's going to be great. I'm really excited to get my 6700 XT for like $200. Anywho.
So are you going to be buying any of these processors?
I have thought about it seriously because I'm very much in the...
since you've updated your computer, hasn't it?
It has. It has been so long. I have been wanting a new GPU for literally 2 years, but obviously couldn't buy one because the graphics card market was a steaming dumpster fire.
Yes.
But it's no longer a dumpster fire, and like I said, prices continue to drop. So this year, this Christmas, I am buying myself a graphics card, and that is happening. Now, the question in my head is, because I'm running a Ryzen 5 2600 as my processor, which, you know, like I said, the 2600, the 3600, the 5600, this new 7600, these are gonna be great processors. They always have been, just really good bang for the buck. When I bought the thing brand new, it was like $200. It was even discounted from the MSRP of $250. And honestly, it's been great. No complaints. 6 cores, 12 threads. Yes, it doesn't have nearly the IPC of current Ryzen processors, which means that the single core performance just is not that great. But for games, and especially the games I play, and especially the crap tier 580 RX 580 GPU that I have, that processor is absolutely fine. It works fabulously. Now, if I were to upgrade to something like a 6700 XT or an RTX 3070, or 3060 Ti, I guess is more in line with the 6700, then I would be, I think, somewhat CPU bottlenecked by that processor in that situation. I'm not 100% positive. It may be possible. Like, it may be that the 2600 will still keep up enough to handle one of those GPUs, especially if I, at the same time, say, put more RAM in it or something like that. But my problem is that I can't, it's an AM4 platform, which means that there are so many processors after the 2600 that I could update to without having to go full AM5 with it. However, the motherboard that I have is kind of crappy. So it's not like I could go get myself a 56 or a 5950 X or something like that and have 16 cores in this PC, in this thing, because it would straight up explode. The VRM is not there to deliver that much power. It would just die. I have thought about possibly going to like a Ryzen 7 8-core 6 thread, possibly one of the 3000 series. So like the 3700 or the 3800, or maybe the 5700. I might be able to do that. I have thought about that, and I'd be able to keep the platform the same, but it is extremely tempting to just upgrade to AM5 and get a brand new 75 or 7600X, and then pass this CPU motherboard combination onto my oldest son, and everybody gets an entire computer upgrade for Christmas. But I don't know. Still up in the air on that one. The only thing that's for sure right now is there's a new GPU that's going to be happening. But I do have my eyes very closely on what AMD is doing right now, because this is going to inform my buying purchases, and this is going to inform my purchases of the next few months in a pretty big way. And honestly, anybody in the PC space should be paying attention to this, because Intel's CPUs are finally competing with AMD's. And obviously, it remains to be seen what we're going to get from Intel exactly. But leaked benchmarks and stuff like that actually suggest that these new 7000 series processors from AMD are going to be extremely competitive with Intel, especially where price is concerned. Because once again, top tier 16-thread 32-core for $700, we're actually expecting Intel's competing CPU about that price point to be very similar to the 12900K, which does not have anywhere near 32 threads. I think they have like 20 or something like that. And it's a good gaming CPU for sure, because it has an extremely high boost clock of like over 5.5 gigahertz. But the 7950X supposedly also has a really high boost clock like that. So it's like suddenly this looks pretty competitive, and it remains to be seen how Intel's going to be firing back to this. So it's just a good time to be paying attention as this is going down. So obviously, listener, this is accompanied by an update to AMD's platform, which means no more AM4 socket. We are now moving to AM5. That means that if you are going to buy one of these CPUs, you do have to buy a new motherboard with a new chipset on it. That is kind of a bummer. That being said, AM4 lasted for 6 years or something like that, which is awesome. Thank you, AMD. Really appreciate the hard work that went into that. At this point, I don't think anybody begrudges them the opportunity to update their platform and have a new socket with all the new technologies that come along with that, which includes PCIe Gen 5 and DDR5 memory, both of which are the standard for this new one. That doesn't mean that all of your PCI is going to be Gen 5, but all of their CPUs support PCIe Gen 5, as they have been announced so far. So let's talk a little bit about the chipsets really quick. There's 4 of them that have been officially announced as of this event. The X670 Extreme, and then the vanilla X670, as well as the B550 Extreme, and the one that most people should probably buy, the B550. So essentially the difference between them is really like how much Gen 5 PCI you get versus Gen 4. That's kind of where the difference lies. So am I going to be able to easily break this down? Not really. Essentially, the X670 Extreme means that everything that connects to the CPU gets Gen 5 support, and everything that connects to the chipset gets Gen 5 support. Everything is it's all Gen 5. Just Gen 5 everywhere for everything. Regular X670 gives you PCI support, Gen 5 support for your storage, and optionally graphics, which means that the motherboard maker can give you full Gen 5 support for your graphics, or like a portion of the lanes for the top PCI slot that where your graphics card normally goes. That's kind of optional for them. And same thing with the B650 line. The Extreme means that you get PCIe Gen 5 guaranteed for more stuff, and optionally for your graphics. Whereas the regular the B650 is, you get, pretty sure the PCIe Gen 5 is only for storage out of the box. So you'll have storage that connects directly to your CPU. Everything that connects to the B650 chipset goes through as Gen 4. And then the Extreme version has that same thing, except you can also have Gen 5 lanes for your graphics. And then X670 is, I don't know. The difference between X670 and B650E Extreme is like kind of obnoxious. I don't know why those are two different chipsets. And I'm sure that in the technical details that were released by AMD following the event, because the event itself was only like 30 minutes long, they did talk about that. I'm positive. I did not read that, so sue me. But in essence, if you want everything guaranteed Gen 5 PCIe, then you want the X670 Extreme. If you don't necessarily care about that because you understand that I'm just playing games and absolutely no graphics card currently on the market is capable of saturating even a Gen 4. Honestly, most of them can't even saturate a Gen 3 by 16 PCI slot. So why would I care about that? Then B650 is just fine for you. That's the one that you want. There you go. Actually, you know what? Looking at their announcement text, I think that the difference between X670 and B650 Extreme is just that X670 is quote unquote for overclockers. Like, they support Gen 5 for storage and some of your graphics bandwidth, and that's it. But the X670 boards are guaranteed to have like better VRMs and power delivery for superior overclocking performance. I think that's the only difference between the two. So, okay. Thanks, AMD, for adding that one bit of confusion into what is otherwise a very positive, upbeat sort of announcement. So, there you go. That's AMD's CPU announcement. That's Ryzen 7000. They did mention briefly their next series of graphics cards by essentially just saying, ooh, it's going to be so good. You guys can't wait to see all the cool stuff. And it's like, thanks. Appreciate that. So yeah, we'll be back with more news on that when they actually say something newsworthy. Okay. So that's AMD. I'm going to go ahead and move on away from AMD. Good for them. They'll see if Intel can fire back appropriately. Now let's talk about Apple real quick, because that's why I'm here. That's my job. First off, Apple has sent out invites for the iPhone event, which is always at the beginning of September. So we knew this was coming. The one, I think, interesting piece of news associated with this is that they're for an in-person event
Yes.
that is going to be happening at the Steve Jobs Theater. So
Isn't
this
it
is the
still
event.
limited?
It is limited attendance. It's not like going to be as big as it has been in the past. But I suspect that because it's in person, that means that a lot of it is going to be a person on a stage talking to a crowd. And that makes me sad.
See, I've still heard that it's going to be I heard that they started filming a couple weeks ago. Certain things.
I know for a fact that like segments of it are going to be, videos as we have seen them in the past. But I suspect that what we're going to end up getting is like Tim Cook doing on-stage transitions between a series of short films.
Yeah.
And it's the Tim Cook on stage doing transitions that is the issue I always had with their in-person events. Like, once again, sorry, Tim, just not really interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, but if you're going to do any on-stage stuff, I'm fine with this.
It's true. It's true.
Instead of doing the whole event on stage,
At the very least, we're not going to have to sit and watch Eddie Q and Phil Schiller talk for 30 or 40 minutes, because that is the worst. Yes. Anyways, man, you want the best thing that Phil Schiller has ever done on stage in an Apple event was the time with the announcement of the G3 iBook clamshell when Steve Jobs made him jump off of a balcony. That is the only time he did anything interesting. Which was great. That's how they proved to the audience that Wi-Fi was a thing. Man, events just used to be so much more fun back in the day. Anywho.
Yes.
So this is the iPhone event. Probably also the watch. Almost certainly also the watch.
Yeah.
And possibly new AirPods Pro. So
please.
Initially, it was kind of like, 50% chance of that. Mark Gurman just this past week actually came out as in favor of expecting AirPods Pro update in this event. So I could bump up the chances of that to about 75-80%. Mark Gurman's pretty reliable, especially this close to the event, which is to be held on September 7th. So, listener, we're recording this on the 4th. It's very possible by the time you are listening to this podcast, the event has happened. So, you may know the answer to this question before I, as of this moment in the past, know. But rest assured, by the time you find out, I will also have found out. And we'll talk about it on next week's podcast. So make sure you tune in. Good grief. Wes, just so you know, I'm not any better at this than you. Anywho. So yes, that's the event. I didn't actually write down the name of the event. What's the event called?
Far Out.
Far Out. That's it. It's like a bunch of stars and
yeah. The speculation everyone's assuming is astrophotography in some sense.
Yep.
Meaning better nighttime photography is really all it is. It's not going to be anything super fancy.
Yes, better night photography, so better night mode essentially, and also satellite calling functionality has also been heavily rumored for the new iPhones. Also,
the Pro phones, right?
Just the Pro phones, from what I understand. Also, just the Pro phones. Updates to the notch on the front. We're rumored to be getting rid of the notch. They're going to switch to a pill-shaped cutout. That rumor has gone in so many different directions over the past 6 months. It was going to be a very small pill shape with a gap and then just a single circle. And the pill was going to be, your IR dot emitter and receiver and stuff for Face ID. And then your selfie camera was going to be right next to that, separated by a little strip of screen. Update as of this past week that actually makes that make sense is that it's going to, in software, be treated like a single giant pill-shaped cutout. Yeah. With that little gap of screen between the two used to represent for the colored dots that represent when your camera or microphone are being used by an app, which actually makes a ton of sense to me. You recapture that tiny bit of screen real estate to the status bar on either side by moving it between the cameras, where you actually have just a little little itty bit of space for it. All you need is space for 2 little dots. That makes perfect sense. I'm actually fully on board with them doing that to recover just that much more space on the screen outside of that camera notch, which is great. That being said, what are they doing with the screen above the pill? Like, it's just a part of the wallpaper. And I think that looks kind of goofy as snot, and I honestly would have preferred them to just push the cameras up a little bit and have a notch.
Yeah, I mean,
basically...
I'm looking at rendered rumors, rumored, you know.
Rumored renders, renderers, rumored.
I'm looking at these pictures, and I mean, I kind of agree that they could have very easily just moved these up a little bit and made it blend into the bezel to have the notch again. But the thing I can see why they may not have is they need them to be that low for just the space of the cameras, and they wanted to have that continuity basically of the screen going across. So I kind of get it. I don't think it looks that bad, but I'm also used to seeing stuff like this on Android phones where it's just a hole punch, and I don't think those look bad. And with something like this, you're going to get wallpapers that take advantage of that. Like there's so many of those for Android phones that have the hole punch that basically in a way hides the camera there. This is going to be a little more difficult than those, but there are ways around it. And I don't think it looks too bad, but yeah, I think it would look better if they moved it up a little bit and just made it a notch, but I don't hate it.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the thing. If they have the space to push it closer to the top of the display to make a shallower than the current notch that is also narrower than the current notch, that then has that little gap of screen between the two that they can use for those warning lights, that actually would be super nice. I would really like that. If it is a matter of space where they just can't get it that close, I do prefer to have the little strip of screen above it than to have just an extremely deep notch like they had on the Pixel 3. Or just the Pixel 3 XL, right? It was just that one. Or was it? Yes.
Yes.
The bucket. So yeah, we'll obviously see what their final version of this looks like on the 7th, but there's some interesting stuff to watch out for. Also interesting for my own personal purchasing habits, considering that this is technically the year that I normally buy a new iPhone. It's been 2 years. They're not actually going to be updating the processor in the standard iPhone, just the Pros. So that's extremely frustrating.
I am very curious to see how they spin that as a good thing.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
It took courage to keep this.
I swear, if Phil Schiller at any point utters the word courage, I'm going to punch a hole in my TV. Like, it's just... Which isn't entirely anger. I would actually love to have a new TV. Like there's new OLEDs out from LG that are just chef's kiss. But anyways, man.
I mean, either way, it's going to be an upgrade for you coming from a 12. You're still going to get a better processor.
Yes, but
just not as much better.
I could get a 13 mini, which has a better processor and is a form factor that I adore.
Yes.
So
as long as
there's also the part of me that is just sitting here thinking to myself, like, what is next year's SE going to look like? Like, the current rumor is that Apple is developing an SE, like they're kind of turning that line into an every year release, just the cheap one. It launches in spring. And so that one will presumably have the same processor. But it will also be kind of the updated full screen design with a notch and have Face ID and stuff like that. So that would be a lot less expensive. So I'm probably going to hold off on buying a new phone until I see whether or not there's going to be a new SE and what that looks like. Yeah. Because best case scenario for me, they've decided to just make that a mini, and they'll have the mini form factor in the SE, and I'll be able to get it for $450 instead of $750. And that would be really nice. Please, Apple, please, please, please. Now that I've asked for it, it probably won't happen, but
No.
we'll see. All right. So that's the Apple event that is coming up. Apple did also do one other newsworthy thing in the past couple of weeks. They have expanded their self-service repair program to laptops. They did say that they were going to be doing this. It initially launched just supporting some iPhones, but now you can order parts and tools to repair the new M2 MacBook Air and their new MacBook Pros. What's interesting about that is that I believe that includes the M2 MacBook Pro, which is baffling because that thing is like a 7-year-old chassis at this point. So why are you supporting that, but you're not supporting the past 7 years of MacBook Pros that are in the same chassis?
The only thing I can
Apple,
think of is it's
make
not
it make
necessarily
sense.
the chassis, it's what's inside. It's
suppose.
probably harder to replace stuff inside those older ones. That's going to be their reason. I don't necessarily think that's true, but that's their reasoning. They've made this specifically to be able to do this, is what they're going to say, even though that's probably wrong. But
If it'll do it to this 13-inch MacBook Pro, it'll do it to a 2016 13-inch MacBook Pro because, newsflash, they're the same computer. They even have the same freaking battery in them, the same screen, the same trackpad. The only thing that's been changed is the keyboard, which, thank heavens, they did change the keyboard.
Now I want to know, they should have made it so you could replace the other keyboard yourself with this updated one.
Seriously. Like,
that
would have made so many people happy. They could have sold that upgrade for like $400 and everybody would have bought it.
Yeah.
Like, they could have made so much money doing that. Like, Apple, you're leaving money on the table. Come on. But yes, it has been expanded. As with the iPhone, it doesn't make sense if you have Apple Care. Just don't do it. And even if you don't have Apple Care, a lot of the common repairs, you're actually just going to be better off taking it to an Apple store and, having them give you a replacement laptop, which is what happens 90% of the time.
Yeah.
Because, because Apple subsidizes a lot of the most common repairs, it's just how it works. And that's why, replacing the Lightning port using the self-service repair program on your iPhone does, in fact, save you, $200 or $300 or something like that versus paying an Apple tech to do it. But replacing your battery does not actually save you any money until you send the batteries back to, send the parts back to Apple for a refund. Same with the screen, because Apple subsidizes those repairs in their stores so that they basically don't make any money off of them. And so you are just doing free labor for Apple if you do those repairs via the self-service repair program. So don't do that. There are repairs that it makes sense to use this program for, but it's not the most common ones, like, say, replacing the battery inside of your laptop. So if you want a cheaper replacement battery for your MacBook, go to iFixit.
Yeah.
That's the actual advice. That's
what I did with my 2015 MacBook Air.
Yep.
I replaced the battery, got it for, I think it was $80 from iFixit, and it came with all the tools that I need to do it, and it was easy to do.
Even on the newer MacBook Pros it's more complicated. They have the multi-cell batteries, some of which are stacked, and then you have the adhesive strips and all that stuff. You get the whole kit from iFixit. It's $120 to $150 depending on the size of the battery. Comes with the tools that you absolutely need to repair it. But honestly, if you're going to be doing repairs even semi-regularly, I'd recommend maybe looking into one of their screwdriver kits. They're very nice.
Yes.
And that's, iFixit is a really great service, really great website. They're awesome folks there. Support them. They do good work in the industry, and it's an important thing that they offer, in particular because it helps keep companies like Apple marginally honest.
Yes.
To a tiny degree. All right. So that's my Apple news. Obviously, there's going to be a whack ton more Apple news come next week, but we'll get into that when the time is right. As of now, I have one other piece of tech news for you, listener. This one just is awesome. You're going to love it. The USB, what are they called now? It's not the USB Consortium, but the USB Standards Committee.
Oh, wait. Sorry.
Basically. They have released a new USB standard that includes basically faster transfer protocols, is what it's all about. So it still uses the USB-C port, which is awesome. That port has a lot of future proofing and utility built into it. It's going to be a very long-lived port, and that's great. Love to see that. And obviously maintains all of the existing compatibilities, will be fully backward compatible with everything else that uses USB-C, including stuff like Thunderbolt 4, Thunderbolt 3, stuff like that. So that's all great. Now you're going to be able to get up to 80 gigabit per second transfer speeds, which is double what USB 4/Thunderbolt 4 could do without an active cable. So it is worth noting that Thunderbolt 4 at least could do 80 gigabits per second of transfer speeds if you had an active cable. So either one that converts it to fiber optic or that otherwise uses signal boosting in order to improve the transfer speeds. So that's what USB 4 is. Sorry, that's what the new USB standard is going to be targeting. Essentially double the speed of USB 4. So that's great. Honestly, nothing else really big changing about that. It's just faster transfer speeds. They're calling it USB 4 version 2.0.
Of course they are.
I hate the USB naming standard.
Yeah.
When they released USB 4, we were like, finally, an end to the trash fire that is the USB naming standard. Because up to that point, we had USB 3, and that was followed by USB 3.1, and then USB 3.2, which was great because USB 3.1 and 3.2 could also exist on USB-C ports or normal USB ports. Type A ports. And then they changed that. They're like, no, this is confusing. This is obnoxious. So if it's Type A port, it's USB 3. If it's a Type C port, it is either USB 3 Gen 1 or USB 3 Gen 2 that have different transfer speeds. Unfortunately, it's just advice, basically, on how to name your ports. And so you would have companies advertising USB 3.1.2 Gen 1 Gen 2.0 support for it was a dumpster fire, and everybody hated it. And so finally they're all like, screw it, this Thunderbolt 3, we're taking all the specs of Thunderbolt 3, putting it into the USB standard. It's called USB 4. That's it. That's the line in the sand. And here they are, USB 4 version 2.0. Flip. Why? Like, not even just version 2. Version 2.0 specifically, which means at some point in time, somebody's going to suggest version 2.1, and I'm going to punch them in the face. I will find whoever it is, and let's be honest, Apple is on this committee, so it might be Tim Cook. I may end up punching Tim Cook in the face over this. It's so frustrating to me. Why is naming in tech so bad?
I don't know. I know what happened. They probably have people from Motorola and Sony doing the naming.
Oh man. It's makes me sad.
It's bad.
Makes me so sad. But yeah, cool. New USB standard. It's twice as fast as the previous one and has the dumbest name that I could possibly imagine. And that's it for my tech news. So Landon, why don't you say something more positive than what I just said?
All right. I will start with something positive. Google News, well, ish. Pixel Buds Pro reviews are now out and about and looking to be watched and read and whatnot. They're out scouring the streets looking for people to say, hey, watch me. No, actually, you have to go find them. They're hiding behind trees and stuff. But the reviews are there. So far, they've all been pretty good. They're basically like what we were assuming. They are AirPods Pro for your Pixel phone or Android device in general, but definitely for if you have a Pixel. All the reviews have been really good. The touch functionality on them works great. Other than like the swiping for volume is hit or miss from what I understand, mostly because it's just a small surface. And I mean, my earbuds don't have that feature, but they are small like this. Like the touch surface is relatively small. I don't think I would use that. It's just easier for me to reach into my pocket, find the volume rocker, and hit that because it's not that difficult. Or if you have a smartwatch, just do it on that because that's also really easy. So
it's like, look, I've been reaching into my pocket to change the volume on stuff since I freaking had an iPod Touch. So
forever,
iPod Touch, iPod, I want to say Nano, but Shuffle. That's the one that didn't have a screen.
That's your first
one.
one.
Since the Shuffle, like we know how to do this, guys. It's okay. If you want a touch service on earbuds large enough to do like volume swiping and stuff like that, then you have to design the earbuds to look like those just horrible things that Microsoft made a few years back. It was basically like
puck.
Inserting a small dinner plate into your ear.
Yes, but those touch surfaces were great.
They were, yep. And the earbuds were uncomfortable as snot and nobody bought them.
True. Or just buy earbuds that have buttons on them.
That is, yep.
Those are available as well. But anyways.
Very true.
Everything else about these earbuds have been really good so far on the reviews. Sound quality's decent. The one thing that I find interesting at the moment is there's currently not an EQ feature, like a custom EQ feature in the app. There is, I want to say, I don't even know if there's preset EQs that you can choose from. I think there has to be, but I just remember hearing you can't customize the EQ if you want to. But Google has said that is coming. So that's good because I use that. Basically, I prefer a flat EQ because that gets you actually closest to what the artist wants you to be listening to.
Yeah.
Please do that. I mean, that's my opinion as an audio I'm not an audiophile, but as an audio engineer type person, that's what I want. I want you to listen to it as I designed it. And every audio engineer out there also wants you to do that.
Yep.
But
they really don't want you to listen to music on your phone speaker, so stop it.
Yeah, no, don't do that. There's also not an EQ app on the Pixel phones themselves, so you can't change it that way either. So that is, again, one of the downsides to these earbuds, but Google has said that they will be updating that app to have that feature, so that's good.
That is good.
I mean, we've already discussed this, but the price on these is $200. So for what you're getting, that's actually a pretty good price. Most earbuds competing with the features that these have are going to be around $250 or more. So for $200, not bad. And you could probably find them on sale somewhere because that's generally how these things go. And they come in coral, fog, which is like a light gray, white color, charcoal, or lemongrass. And don't mistake this for something that you're going to put in your like smoothie in the morning. It may have a similar name, but it definitely wouldn't blend well or taste good.
There's lithium in there and cobalt and other heavy metals. Just don't eat your earbuds, please.
Yes. Don't do that. All right. That is the good news Caleb was asking for. Okay. I do have some other tech news. Not necessarily bad news, but it's interesting. So the first one is Ring, the company that we usually don't recommend you buy anything from because it's Amazon.
Right.
They've made a new product. It's called the Ring Intercom. And what this is basically a Ring doorbell type thing without a camera. So there's a plus. And it's an intercom system. So basically, like, this is going to be, from what I've read, this is going to be better for those that are in an apartment type situation that can't put a doorbell, into their onto their apartment, house, or whatever they're renting. But they can
Right.
use this because it'll work a little bit better. And it interacts with the Ring app, so you can talk to people that way. Again, you can't see them because from what I understand, this does not have a camera on it. But
Yeah.
and it works with all the other Ring stuff, obviously. So that's kind of cool. Currently, it is only going to be available in Europe right now, but it is Amazon is planning on bringing this to other places early next year, including the US. And it is starting right now at 120 euros and that's a bundle including an extra battery pack. Or no, there is a bundle that is 150 euros, so only $30 for an extra battery pack on this. And there's usually discounts on this. I mean, it's Amazon. They discount their stuff on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But that is now available, or I guess it'll be released in October. But
Oh,
I
yeah.
think you can pre-order it. So there's that if you're interested. I think it's not a bad device. I still wouldn't necessarily recommend it because it is Ring. They are getting a little better about certain things, but still hit or miss.
or have we just not caught them on their latest horrible thing?
Mostly that one. That one.
That's always the thing is people are all like, oh, it's been so long since I've heard about Amazon or Facebook or whatever in the news over data leaks or data harvesting or whatever. It's like, yeah, so surely they've gotten better since the last one. And then like a month or two later, some horrible scandal comes out and it turns out, no, they were just doing it differently this time. And it's like, I feel like at this point, the pattern has kind of been set. They never actually stop doing it. They just get better at hiding it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. All right. My next little bit of news is something that I find really interesting. So, you know about these people that tend to make they write stories, whether it's a book or a movie or a TV show or something about companies or people in companies. Like there's multiple Steve Jobs movies. There's a couple different books. The one I recommended, the book at least, is by Walter Isaacson. Really good book.
Yeah.
He was the one that was given permission by Steve Jobs, was interviewed Steve Jobs for this book. Really good book. But someone is going to be making a movie about BlackBerry. And I know nobody was really asking for this, but I am interested in this. Definitely. Definitely want to watch this when it comes out. There is not necessarily a date yet. They do have a cast for some of the characters, but it is going forward supposedly that they're going to be making this movie. But I'm definitely interested because as a tech nerd, phone nerd, I want to watch this. Because I mean, I never owned a BlackBerry device myself. Back in the day when they were popular, I had a Palm Trio, which was kind of a BlackBerry, but it was Palm's version, and it had Windows running on it instead of whatever Palm's WebOS or whatever it was, or BlackBerry is whatever BlackBerry's operating system was. But BlackBerry was hugely popular for a long time, and then the iPhone happened, and then they went down. Because they didn't take the keyboard off their phone until like 5 years too late.
Oh yeah. Oh, I thought I had a BlackBerry, but turns out it's a Palm. Yep. I genuinely, like, not even that long ago, like a week ago or something like that, I went onto eBay just because I was curious and found the last BlackBerry phone with a keyboard that was running BlackBerry OS. It was the Palm Classic, or not Palm Classic. No, it was the BlackBerry Classic, and that thing on eBay was retailing for like 80 some odd bucks, and I genuinely just about bought one because I'm like, but what is it like? Like, what is it like to try and use that in 2022?
Yeah,
it's a question nobody is asking, but I am darn curious.
Yeah, I remember this has been a few years now. They did when they made the switch to Android phones, and most of them were full touchscreen phones. They did have one that still had a keyboard, and I remember on the TV show Last Man Standing, Tim Allen's character had that phone for one season. BlackBerry
Whoa.
must have been a sponsor, because I remember there was BlackBerry phones and there was I want to say some Sony phones. Sony phones are all over on TV because Sony usually is very heavily involved with making a lot of these TV shows. So usually we'll see Sony phones on TV shows, but not BlackBerry phones. Not very often. But there I can't remember what it was called, but there was a BlackBerry device that had a pretty sizable screen on it and a really low profile touch keyboard that actually also worked as like you could swipe across it. It was basically a touchpad as well as a keyboard. It was weird. But I remember Tim Allen's character on Last Man Standing had that phone for at least one season. It's very odd.
That's
the only time
baffling.
I ever saw that phone being used by anybody. Never saw it in the wild. But I did see it on TV once. But yeah,
I actually did see that phone in the wild one time.
Really?
I used to work with a guy who had the BlackBerry Classic that I was just talking about. And it got to the point where BlackBerry had announced that they were shutting down support for BlackBerry OS 10 and that they were going to be basically kiboshing his ability to use any of the features of the thing via their servers. So like it was shutting down all mobile connectivity for the device. Like you couldn't connect it to a network. And so it couldn't support a SIM card. And then like technically speaking, apps and messaging and stuff would still work over Wi-Fi, but like in an extremely limited way and stuff like that. And so he was like, all right, fine. I can't keep using BlackBerry OS 10. So I'm going to have to upgrade to one of their Android ones, one of their Android phones. And he got the one like very similar to what you're talking about, where it was like, because, like the BlackBerry Classic has like a 3-inch, mostly square screen above a reasonably sized keyboard, like a classic BlackBerry phone. And even the Passport, which had a much larger screen, still had like, it was a squat screen with a big keyboard underneath it. But their Android phones were all these tall rectangular screens like a modern smartphone with a keyboard shoved onto the bottom. They all just looked incredibly unwieldy to type with.
It was the BlackBerry Key 1 and the Key 2 are the two phones that they had. Or they did have the BlackBerry Passport. No, that actually ran WebOS on it, now that I'm looking at it.
That one ran the BlackBerry's operating system. But yes, the Key, I think it was the Key 1 was the one that he had. And I just remember looking at that phone and thinking to myself, like, it can't be comfortable to type on that keyboard, given how far down it is on the phone. You'd have to have your thumbs in like a really awkward angle to hit those keys just so that you can support the weight of the phone. It's like when Apple first released the iPhone X and they had that giant empty space below the on-screen keyboard. And everyone was like, that's ugly. What the heck is that for? And it turns out it's to move the keys up so that you can actually type on the dang thing. Like, that was kind of important. And BlackBerry did not do that with the physical keyboard on the Key 1 and Key 2. No. So
they did also have the BlackBerry Priv, which was a slider.
Yeah.
So it slid up and it had a keyboard, but it had a normal full screen phone on front. And then if you wanted that physical keyboard, you could slide it up and type on that.
I wonder how much one of those costs on eBay. Okay, anyways, this is going to be a problem for me. I'm going to spend way more money than I should on old Blackberries on eBay, I'm sure. But maybe I should just wait for the movie to come out and watch the movie instead. Maybe that'll scratch my itch. Yeah. Or maybe that'll make me buy a bunch of old BlackBerry phones. Dang
That's going to make you want to buy more, actually.
It probably will.
Yeah. So keep an eye out on that. A new BlackBerry movie coming out in the future sometime.
So bizarre.
I'm definitely interested. It's probably not going to be in theaters. It's probably going to come to, Hulu or Amazon or something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm still probably going to watch it because I have to.
Yeah. Honestly, a biopic about any kind of like tech personality or tech company, there are not that many that I think you could actually release to theaters and expect to make money. Like even with the Steve Jobs ones, only one of those made it to theaters.
Yeah.
And that was the one that was based off of the
Walter
Oh my
Isaacson
gosh,
book.
Walter Isaacs. I was about to say Oscar Isaacs. I'm like, that is not. No.
No.
The Walter Isaacs biography and starred Michael Fassbender and whatnot. But there was the other one with Ashton Kutcher that was just on Amazon, I think. Like it never made it.
It was a
I
Netflix
think
one, I think.
Oh, right. I think you could also do Bill Gates, maybe. Like you might be able to make a Bill Gates biopic and launch that into theaters, or just a biopic about Microsoft as a whole and get that into theaters. But just there are not that many other tech personalities that have like broad enough like understanding. Like people don't know who people are in the tech world for the most part. So yeah, it's interesting that this is a thing that's being made. Yeah. I'll bet it's a Canadian production company that just wanted to make a movie about a Canadian tech company, and they're like, we have Blackberry, and
that's
kind of
that
it.
would be interesting. But yeah, so there's that.
Well,
and that is all my news for this week.
That's good stuff. I'm very interested in seeing how that biopic turns out. All right, listener, gaming. Since we don't have any Microsoft news, because obviously none of us were going to check in with, what Wes might want us to talk about in terms of Microsoft. We also didn't check in with Wes about what he might want us to talk about in terms of gaming. Now, that means that there's definitely going to be a lot less gaming news than there probably should be, given that a couple of weeks ago was Gamescom. There were a ton of announcements, and not that many of them actually crossed my personal plate and news feed. So that's how you know that Apple didn't announce a gaming console or anything like that. There were a few things that I just did want to touch on. And if Wes comes back and has a giant list of games announcements that that are really cool and stuff, we'll obviously cover that next week, because I don't have a giant list. What I do have is the Sony DualSense Edge. Now, Sony's DualSense, I think, is kind of undisputably the superior controller for the current generation of consoles. Nothing wrong with the Microsoft Series controller, but the DualSense is just a step above in terms of comfort and functionality. That I'm pretty sure everybody's in agreement on that. It is the superior controller. However, if you are an extremely serious console gamer, then Microsoft does have a one-up for that in the form of the Xbox Elite controller. And that thing has a bunch of customizable functionality and bits and pieces you can swap out to improve and change the ergonomics of the controller to suit you specifically and stuff like that. Stuff that like a mainstream mass market controller like the DualSense just can't really match. And that's essentially what the DualSense Edge is. It's a PS5 controller, Elite controller, essentially. It includes extra control buttons and stuff, control surfaces on the bottom of the controller. Allows you to set up user profiles and store them on the controller so that they come with you to whatever console you connect to. It has swappable thumbsticks as well as swappable face buttons and stuff like that, so that you can adjust the feel and whatnot of the control surfaces. I believe it does in fact have tunable trigger feedback as well, so that you can adjust the resistance of the triggers, so on and so forth. It is the Sony equivalent of the Xbox Elite controller. Now, I'm not sure whether or not it is built as well or as poorly, as the case may be, as some of the Elite controllers. Obviously, there have been videos where people have had first impressions hands-on time with the DualSense Edge, but we're going to need to get a couple of months into the life cycle of this thing before we know whether or not it's got chronic reliability issues or anything like that. But as it stands right now, this seems like a pretty good response to the existence of the Elite controller from Xbox. So that was the thing that they announced at Gamescom. Also, another completely unrelated thing that was announced at Gamescom, Dead Island 2. The only reason this caught my eye is because I still remember the initial launch trailer. Not even the launch trailer. I think it was just the announcement trailer for the original Dead Island, which is actually kind of an incredible piece of cinema. frankly, if you haven't watched it, listener, you probably should go watch it. It's really cool. Dead Island was an incredibly well-received zombie survival game, and Dead Island 2 was actually announced shortly after Dead Island 1 was launched back in like 2010? 2012? Something like that. It's been a really long time. And obviously, this is a completely different game than the Dead Island 2 they announced back then, because that surely got scrapped somewhere along the way. And now we have this. So I don't know. It's actually happening this time? Maybe? We'll see. And speaking of games that are actually happening, apparently, Skull and Bones, which is a Ubisoft game that you may recall they announced like 5 years ago. I feel like that was like the very first, maybe the second year that we were doing the podcast. Ubisoft announced Skull and Bones. It's basically just the ship part of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which a lot of people really wanted a game that was just the ship bits from that game. So Skull and Bones was that. Pirate Simulator. It was actually announced at the same time as Sea of Thieves. And Sea of Thieves has been out for a while, guys. Skull and Bones, still not a thing. But Ubisoft came back to Gamescom with it, and we're like, hey, check it out. Here's Skull and Bones. It's like actually in a launchable state. We're going to actually launch it. They have a launch date scheduled for the beginning of 2023. Or actually, no. Was it later this year? I think it was early next year, January, like February timeframe, but I could be wrong with that. Another thing that Ubisoft is also doing is closing the servers for a bunch of games, mostly affecting old multiplayer modes for classic Assassin's Creed games on both console and PC and stuff like that. But interestingly, also affecting the ability to play single-player games on PC. Because apparently they were calling home to servers somewhere, and if Ubisoft shuts off those servers, you then have to basically disconnect your computer from the internet if you want to play this game that has no online features and no multiplayer modes. It's a completely single-player game that just for some reason requires a connection to a Ubisoft server to play. If your computer is connected to the internet, it will just error out and the game won't launch. So that's dumb. There were even a couple of games that do that on the console as well. So you have to disconnect your console from the internet in order to play some of those games. So basically Ubisoft being giant turds. They announced the closure of these servers a couple of months ago, like back at the end of June, and they were supposed to go into effect on September 1st. They did announce late in the day before they were supposed to go up or die, essentially, that they were going to postpone the shutdown of these servers for a couple of weeks. I think they gave it like a 3-week hiatus, so it's going to be late in the month of September that they will shut these down. But still, it's coming. They're planning to shut these things down. So if you ever played multiplayer modes or online focused single player modes from Ubisoft, there's a good chance that your games are just not going to be playable anymore. So that's actually kind of par for the course with Ubisoft. Giant bummer though for anyone that applies to.
Yeah.
So that's the game news that I have. Like I said, obviously Gamescom happened and a whole bunch of announcements of new IP, updates on existing IP, and so on happened. Mostly Skull and Bones and Dead Island 2 stuck out to me because I've heard that before. They have announced these games before, they promised release dates for them before, and nothing happened. So it's going to be interesting to see if they actually get launched this time. But that's all the gaming news that I have. Landon, do you have any gaming news?
No, I do not.
That's fair. So yes, listener, we'll see if Wes has anything that he wants to add. We could check with him before we sit down to record these podcasts, but we don't.
Why would we do that?
I don't know. It seems like a lot of extra work.
Yeah.
Work that I could spend on this outro. Listener, thank you so much for joining us for the tech news this week. We're super happy to always bring it to you. But if you would like to get a hold of us and tell us how we can do that better, or tell us how awesome we're doing, or tell Wes that he needs to, like, stop going on family vacations and stuff like that, because come on, we need to know about Microsoft or video games or whatever. Or if you would like to give Wes $1 so that he can buy a Coke from McDonald's, then you can get a hold of us via a number of ways. You can hit us on callingallplatforms.com in the comments. You can get a hold of us on Facebook, Calling All Platforms, or on Twitter at CapTechPod. You can email us at podcast@callingallplatforms.com. You can also join the Patreon, patreon.com/callingallplatforms. But if you do nothing else, come back next week and we will talk to you then.
See ya.
Calling All Platforms is a production of Supporter Sound Studios. To learn more about how you can support the podcast, go to www.patreon.com/callingallplatforms.